Today, I'm delighted to welcome Chuck Keiper, Executive Director for the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council, affectionately known as NOPEC. NOPEC is the largest and most successful governmental energy aggregation group in the nation. It arranges the supply of roughly $700 million of electricity and natural gas each and every year. As executive director, Chuck's responsibilities include managing NOPEC's supply relationships, overseeing a 27-member board of directors, and leading two nonprofit service organizations. Chuck's 15 years of leadership at NOPEC are marked by many, many accomplishments, including the significant growth in the number of communities and customers served, which I know is a topic he'll be speaking about in detail in just a few minutes. Chuck's leadership has also led to the creation of PACE, the Property Assessed Clean Energy Lending Program, and the NOPEC Foundation Fund, which addresses the needs of NOPEC member communities and nonprofits that are operating inside those communities. Before taking on the top job at NOPEC, Chuck had a distinguished career in public service, including previous roles as vice president of the renowned Garfield Institute for Public Leadership at Hiram College and nearly 20 years as a Portage County commissioner. He's a lifelong believer in regional intergovernmental relationships and initiatives and has been instrumental in the development of a wide variety of initiatives, from the Northeast Ohio Office of Economic Development to the Trade and Economic Consortium to the Energy Council and more. Chuck is truly one of our community's transformational leaders. I invite you, please join me in welcoming today's leader lunch break, Chuck Keiper. Welcome, take it away.
Thank you very much, Becky. I'm assuming everyone can hear me at this point. It is quite an honor to be asked, and it was a very kind introduction, so thank you very much. I thought for a while and had some great staff help about what we ought to present today. The commercial for NOPEC is what we usually do, and I really thought, given the fact that this is a forum about and for leadership, that we would maybe put into context a number of our programs and at least my time at NOPEC, our path to making some leadership decisions. So hopefully you will find this enjoyable, and I'll look forward to your questions after the fact. I do see, by the way, our Cuyahoga County board member, Ben Holbert, is here. So hi, boss. Hopefully I will pass muster. With that, Becky, I'm ready for our first slide. Thank you. This is a little history of NOPEC. For those of you who don't know, we were formed about the time that deregulation of electricity and natural gas happened within the state of Ohio about 26 years ago now. In 2000, we are a council of governments officially. That is the realm under which we do most of our businesses. You can see on the map, these are counties where we have members and growing. About 252 members, I think, as of this morning in 21 counties. Just under 500,000 electric customers and about 445,000 natural gas customers. Next slide. Lovely. I wanted to give a plug to Deepa Vedavayas, who is our Director of Sustainability. Probably many of you know her. A great leader in her own right. But she, as a part of her work at Harvard for a second master's degree, I believe, put together a great story about how organizations such as ours developed across the United States. So a quick plug. It's a great way to find out a little more about what's happening around the country and specifically in Ohio as it relates to governmental aggregations for electricity and natural gas, of which we were the very first natural gas aggregation in the nation. Next slide. This is our overall mission: to aggregate, educate, and advocate for the communities, residents, and small businesses we serve. Our goal is to meet communities where they are and help them chart a path and be a part of the attainment of that path in whatever way they want to be in the energy space. Our focus areas really are supporting thriving communities, protecting our planet, and operating with integrity. Those are really parts of our core being. Next slide. In 2000, there was a study group formed by the Northeast Ohio Mayors and Managers Association. I was in a side door affiliated with that, and there was a lot of studying that happened with what would happen if the state were to deregulate electricity and natural gas. Both of those things came to pass. And as a part of that study commission, as that was becoming law and taking shape around 2000, somebody in that group of study elected officials said, hey, maybe a group of us could come together and get even more buying power. What we were successful in doing was having a provision put in the law that allowed for governmental opt-out aggregation. I'm not going to drill into what that is, but basically it assumes that everybody in a community is a part of the aggregation unless they ask to not be. You have to put that on the ballot for gas and for electric as separate things. And once that law became rooted and became passed by the Senate and House and signed by the governor, um, 90 communities in 8 counties came together and were basically the cornerstone of what has evolved to become NOPEC. The first NOPEC General Assembly was held in November of 2000. Next slide, please. When you look at the world today, in end of last year, we had 249 communities in 20 counties and just under 950,000 customers. So a lot of growth. Next slide. So when I arrived, there was about, I'm going to say there was probably around 132 communities, something like that, in 7 or 8 counties. So we've had this great growth. And when I was courted to leave the Garfield Institute and come to NOPEC, I didn't really want to be a supply chain manager. I thought I would get relatively bored with that relatively soon. But I did suggest to the board that hired me that if they were interested in finding how much real value we could bring to the communities that we serve through this group effort, that I would be tempted beyond belief and would leave the Hiram Institute and come take over. So that's ultimately what happened. And these were really kind of the questions that started the growth of NOPEC. When I arrived at NOPEC, incidentally, I was the second executive director who had been here, I think, 5 or 6 years. He still does great consulting work with us. His name was Lee Harrington, a former state senator. Probably some of you know him. And really did some foundational work in terms of staking the boundaries with communities on where the survival of such an organization could be grounded. I had the task of taking the one other employee beside myself, so there were two of us when I got here, and deciding how we would grow this. I don't even want to call it a business, this service. We do run it like a business. That's my background. But it really is rooted in public service. There is zero reason for an organization like NOPEC or its operating company or our foundation to exist if we were not in service to the people who created us. And so keeping that as the North Star of what we do every day was front and center always. So within that context, the question really is, what do our communities need? What do they want? What do our customers want? Are those the same? Is there an intersection? How do we take this need and cement it, the need for what we do in the hearts and in the minds of those we serve? How do we make ourselves exceed their expectations, and how do we make ourselves something that communities want to continue to invest in? The basic reality when I arrived was that 80% of our customers 80% of the customers who had NOPEC as a supplier for natural gas and electricity had no idea who we were. Zero idea. So imagine, and by the way, not only did that happen, but every 3 years for electricity, every 2 years for natural gas, we're required under Ohio law to send a card or a letter to every one of our customers and say, hey, remember us? You don't have to belong. So imagine if anybody else did that with their customer base, what that would mean. So um, NOPEC offered no programming that differentiated us from any other suppliers. We had a grant program that had started as a result of a supply chain agreement. It was a sizable program. About 10% of the money in that program had actually been distributed. So we really had no meaningful programming when I arrived. Ohio law limits what councils of governments are allowed to do. So, for example, we're not allowed to borrow money. We're not allowed to have a credit rating. We're not allowed to engage in any activity that would bring risk or liability back to the organizations who created us and manage us now. So, what does that mean in terms of delivering services? How do we do that? So, that was a big question. And then overall, I've already said this, and I say it often, almost multiple times daily to people in our world. How do I, as a leader, create an organization that does all of those things, but never loses its focus on the commitment to public service? Again, if it weren't for the publics that we serve, there's no need for us to get up and come to work every day. It is what we do and who we do it for. So these are basically, in a nutshell, the answers. And then I'm going to walk through a couple of things to hopefully provide a little light on that. What communities and customers wants? Well, we started to talk to them. First, it was me. And then as our staff grew, it was our marketing team. We do annual customer surveys. Our customers are really regular retail customers for natural gas and electricity. We represent around 40,000 small businesses within our footprint. Um, we drill down and ask them questions. And then, of course, community leaders are the key to our being able to have customers because they have to agree to maintain a membership here or to join in the first place. So we try to find out what is in their minds and in their hearts and what's on their worry list, what's on their excitement list, and where we can help them with. And then we've learned to read between the lines. There are common threads. They don't always sound like common threads, but you have to kind of really listen deeply. Designing programs around what we think are the most common of those threads was one of the ways we hoped to be, and I hoped to have programs that would launch successfully and bring meaning and value to not only NOPEC, but the customers we serve and the communities we serve, but to the brand that we were trying to build. And then again, don't forget why we're here in the first place, right? Um, every customer and every community leader wants the very best price and the stability in pricing that they can get. That is the number one thing that everyone asks us for. As the electricity prices have been going up recently, we get more and more questions about why that's happening. There's a lot of reasons for that. That's not the subject of this. By the way, I invite anybody who wants those answers. You'll see my email at the end of this presentation. Feel free to reach out. We have ready answers to those kinds of questions. It is our space and we are experts at it, and we would be happy to share our insights if you have an appetite for those. So this space, so think about your world as if you were around 25 years ago paying an electric bill. What happened was you got an electric bill in the mail or gas bill in the mail. You opened it up, you looked at how much it cost, you wrote a check out, you sent it back, and you that is the entire amount of time in your whole life that you spent thinking about natural gas electricity. Um, I believe the estimates are around 8 minutes a year on average that the average person thinks about their utility bills. So it's not important until it is. When it starts to get more expensive, then you worry about what it is and why it is. So how do we go from a a brand, a name that nobody can remember or cares about, low interest topic in the first place, to a name that means something, that stands for something. How do we do that? Well, we deliver on our promises to serve by developing programming that really makes a difference, that eases the burdens of local government, eases the burdens of people, of the normal people that we serve, and makes this commodity again an item that they don't have to think about or worry about. So, if you think about the questions I asked before, how do we deliver these things with a government council structure that doesn't allow us to do very much? And the answer to that is we created an operating company. It's a 501(c)(4). For those of you who know what that is, not a dark money PAC servicing political whims, but really a public service governmental organization. It does allow us to make loans. It does allow us to borrow. It does allow us to do those kind of things that are important to being able to deliver the core services that this company has been built around. And then we also believe that if we were successful, we would have excess income. And if we did our management right, what do we do with the excess income? It's not really about us or building a war chest, or although we've had to have operating cushions, and those are now in place after 15 years. But how do we give back in a real meaningful way for things that don't necessarily have anything to do with the energy space back to our communities? And then how do we keep our focus on public service? We operate NOPEC on a series of core values. I have it listed here 3 times. We talk about them every day. They are a part of every team meeting that we have. It's a part of every board discussion that we have. Who we are and what we are and who we serve and why we serve are all part of our core values so that it is never, ever lost. All of our board members have been steeped in this. We hire people, we reward people, we evaluate people, and that includes me and board members and everybody else based on our NOPEC core values. Next frame. So these are some of the programs that we have put together. And we're going to talk about the grant program in a minute. We have a granting program. We spend $4 to $5 million a year on that program. Community event sponsorships. So if you have home days in your community, people would ask NOPEC regularly, can we fund that? Can we buy a booth? And so we finally just started to award every community a certain amount of money. Those things are all based on the number of people who participate in their communities in our programming. We have low interest energy efficiency financing, and we give very low cost small business energy audits so that folks can begin their own sustainability journeys in meaningful ways. That's, by the way, a tip of a very big iceberg. So let's talk about our grant program very quickly. This goes back to listening and talking. Every single elected official in my first year where we developed no programs, I just went to every government I could, listened, sat through council meetings, sat through township trustee meetings, went to public forums, hosted them, and just listened to what people said. And the number one thing that they all said was, we need money. And every department head, when we dug deeper, said the same thing. We need money. So a grant program seemed logical. When you give money away, I have learned the impression it leaves lasts as long as the money lasts. And if the money goes away, it's a what have you done for me lately kind of a situation. So how do we source those kind of dollars? How do we figure out how to make something that's impactful over time? And how do we fund it? And the answer to how we fund it is that I was able to base my new supply chain negotiations around the creation of this program. And the reason that that happened is that in my research, I learned that there's a standard amount of money that any company will spend, including energy companies, on identifying a potential customer. They'll spend a like amount of money or more signing up that customer, and they'll spend another amount of money to keep that customer. So we went to supply chain potential partners and said, "You're in luck. You don't have to do A, B, or C. We're going to do that for you. But we don't think it's fair that your shareholders get to get all of those savings. We would like to share them with our shareholders as well." And that was the enough of a negotiating space to be able to create our NOPEC Energized Community Grant Program. You can see on the basics down below, we give dollars based on the number of participating community members in every community. It's $4.5 to $5 million annually. We really desire to give the dollars away. There's very little hoops. It's a one-page online application. The way that we get it to be known through the elected community in any community that we're doing this is that we do require that that grant be accepted by a legislative act so that once a year they are reminded that we are giving them the money and they can make a conscious choice about where it goes. We have now done over $62 million in this program. If you add the millions that were in the program before I got here, we're probably a little over $70 million in total grants. The reason that we structured it as energy efficiency grant only is that I wanted the brand to stand for something. Sustainability is an important theme that we've heard throughout our initial NOPEC Northeast Ohio footprint. There's a lot of buy-in to that whole notion. And we wanted to be fostering good behavior. We didn't want to be throwing good money after bad. We wanted people to make conscious choices about how best to utilize and reduce their energy costs. And that has made NOPEC stand for something. At $62 million, NOPEC has become the largest governmental funder of energy efficiency in the history of the state of Ohio. That is not something that happened haphazardly. Our board talked about it. We thought about it when we created the program. They ultimately said, "Oh yeah, but you got to figure out how to fund that for a long period of time." And that all kind of worked out. And it's a great part of our brand. And it has really become the cornerstone benefit that all of our communities have come to rely on in a very, very positive way. The next slide. Property assessed clean energy loans. You heard Becky talk about that earlier. This actually, I didn't create it. I created NOPEC's program. This is a program that existed in Ohio law. My background before I arrived as a county commissioner was predominantly in economic development. I wrote the very first revolving loan fund with my partner in the state of Ohio, and arguably the first or second in the country. That was kind of my background, and I wanted to bring that lending capability to NOPEC. In fact, I made it a promise during my last interview to the board chair who hired me that I would find a way to fund this and to put it in place. So the problem with PACE loans was they're designed to be very large. They're very cumbersome. They're very expensive loans. And we had to figure out a way to make a PACE loan available to our average customer, which was either a government or a small business, right? So we don't have a huge hotel in downtown Cleveland who's borrowing four million or $10 million for this kind of a program. We have somebody who's in an old Lawson store whose coolers were last updated in 1975, who wants to be able to continue to do their mom and pop pizza shop in that business building, but they need a cooler that's not breaking their bank book. So we had to design a program around that. So again, we are constantly having elected officials saying, "Hey, NOPEC, help us with our downtown. It's hard to keep businesses in downtown. They're getting their butts kicked by Lowe's and by Home Depot and by everything that's happening online. And they have a hard time borrowing dollars." The beauty of PACE, if you look at the solution on the right side, is that these dollars don't go against your balance sheet. They're done with your annual taxes. So instead of making a monthly payment, you have a special assessment like thing that appears on your real estate taxes. That means it can transfer with the property. So if you sell your business, you're not laden with this ongoing thing. It stays with the property. It can be assumed. It's got a bunch of magical properties, except that we found out it's very expensive, and we have to sell them in the secondary market to keep our pool replenished. But you can see that our board put in $2 million and then up to $8 million, and then we were able to match a lot of that with almost $20 million from the USDA. So it's a very healthy pool. And to help us guide that, we created under our NOPEC umbrella a new committee who oversees the underwriting of that. So we've had to have some training for all of us, including board members, about how, what, and when good loans make sense and when they don't. We've had a very successful portfolio, one foreclosure, which happened just in the last year, in the now 8 years we've been doing this. So we feel pretty good about that. And it's again, listening to our customers, listening to communities. Our governments can borrow these funds as well. We've done libraries and churches. We do governments, pseudo governments like boys and girls clubs and libraries, and we also do small businesses. We'll do up to $1 million, from 100,000 to $1 million in these loans, and it's a very, very successful program. Next slide. All right. So how does a new program get started? At least at NOPEC, there's somebody, or in our case, an awful lot of somebodies. We have a handful of people, six of them, whose job it is just to visit our local government officials every day across those 250 plus communities. We also have a community outreach team who go to places like senior centers and home days, and we do a lot of tabling. And so we're trying to be where the people are. And people just come up and say to us pretty regularly, hey, I got a problem. And in this case, the program we're going to talk about, people said, hey, can't you use your PACE dollars to help us with our housing crisis? We have old housing stock. There are parts of communities in our footprint that have essentially been abandoned since the Rust Belt days. So think about neighborhoods built around steel mills in Youngstown and Warren. Think about cities where the population used to be 25,000, now it's 18, or it used to be 17,000, now it's 12. That's happened all over the Northeast Ohio footprint. I think we've all read about what's happened with brain drain and people moving. The fastest growing communities in Ohio tend to be Cincinnati and Columbus. Um, Good news from a census standpoint over the last few years for Northeast Ohio. Cleveland and a number of other of our communities are kind of clawing back and holding people and have actually seen some positive growth. So hopefully that's over, but we've got communities that are stuck. So when we got sick of hearing it and kind of couple that with a little bit of inspiration and start to do some what ifing, we've found out that, okay, we get the problem. We don't have the ability to solve it on our own. Maybe we can find a partner or a group of partners whose own problem is the other half of the solution we're seeking. And so with a residential PACE program, there's really two huge problems. You can't sell residential PACE loans to a government in the secondary mortgage market because anybody who's buying those as an investment believes that small residential loans in the $100,000 to $150,000 range are the highest risk loans in the market. And we're going into what are typically the most blighted residential areas because that's what our governments have asked us to help them with. And they haven't seen real investment in decades. And most banks, even though they have their own community reinvestment standards that they have to maintain, they're hesitant about going into these areas because the loss rate is higher. So how do we get through that to help them and to get to a place where we can start a program? And we came up with what we call the NOPEC Neighborhood Next program, where you can buy essentially a $300,000-ish home for about $220,000 starting on your first day with about 50% equity. and with an estimated payment of about $1,300 a month. Now, how do we do that? By the way, the pictures there are real pictures from the first home built in this program. Let's flip the next slide and we'll tell you a little more about it.
And actually, Chuck, I just want to let you know we've reached our 30 minutes, so we're going to
Oh,
need to wrap up here. I
we're
know
pretty
time
close.
flies. Okay,
We're
great.
pretty close. Long story short, we're partnering with county land banks who have both land and buildings and access to dollars through a Ohio Welcome Home program. Under construction in Ashtabula County, working on scaling it, the next project, hopefully in Trumbull County, and working to find the dollars to be able to put this through all of our electric communities throughout our footprint. Next slide, and I'll try to wrap us up. There we go. I'll take any questions at this point.
Fantastic. Well, clearly we could talk for days about the incredible work that is happening thanks to NOPEC and thanks to your leadership, Chuck. Let me ask one specific question. Do you have an example of a community that has really leaned into this potential for partnership with NOPEC? Can you describe is there one that comes to mind that is really a shining star?
Well, we have great relationships with almost all of our communities. Cleveland is one of our biggest gas customers. Just great stuff happening. They are very much into the sustainability world. The city of Maple Heights in Cuyahoga County, very much engaged. City of Solon, also in Cuyahoga County, very engaged. I'm going to give an example. If I had to pick one that I think is particularly an interesting relationship, it's the city of Warren, Ohio, in Trumbull County. Their mayor's also on our board. They've had parts of their communities that they literally had to abandon as steel mills and auto plants all went away. And they are embracing a number of sustainability initiatives, kind of getting their feet up under them. So it's never too late to start is kind of the Warren story. They have a really good city council that gets it. And they also have a community that we are targeting for Neighborhood Next that really hasn't seen any reasonable investment in 30 years. And they're becoming very excited about being our partners there.
That's great. And Chuck, just because we're up against time, let me ask you one more question, which is, so if somebody on our conversation today is looking to get better plugged into NOPEC, either as an individual or as a small business, or even as a leader in a community, how can they next step move into a better connection with NOPEC?
We're pretty easy to find, www.nopec.org. Pretty easy to find. You can send me an email directly from that site. It's my first initial, last name, Keiper at nopec.org. And we love being engaged with our community. We love problem solving. We are working on a new regional sustainability committee so we can get better insights from people and bring those to our best practices.
Well, we are one of those organizations that has benefited from a partnership with NOPEC at the Cleveland Leadership Center. We are so grateful. NOPEC has been a sponsor these past 2 years of one of our categories within our annual civic pitch competition, Accelerate. You've been a sponsor of our climate and energy innovation category. And boy, have we had some amazing ideas come forward because of that support. So, Chuck, let me just say directly as an individually and on behalf of the Cleveland Leadership Center, thank you for your partnership. And I invite the audience to thank you for joining us as today's spotlighted leader for our lunch break. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everybody.